Hello, Danvers. Welcome to the May 9th Topics of the Town News. And I have with me John Toomey as the co-host and Matt Duggan as a special co-host. I think
Good evening.
he's getting acclimated here a little bit, so
Right.
we'll have some good discussion. What I want to make sure is that the show has been prepared and introduced to the town of Danvers specifically for the news of Danvers. Transparency and independent reporting is our motto. The Topics of the Town News reporting is direct and comprehensive. We will always report only the truth that we know, sometimes with our opinion included, which
Sometimes.
commentary. What we have today is what we like to start off with is the news story number 1, town elections. We just had town elections on May 7th. The turnout was 900 voters
Very low.
for 4.3%.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I talked to Mr. Collins this afternoon, and he and I agreed that this is probably one of the lowest or one of the few lowest ones we've ever experienced. But we at the show have been saying there's voter apathy and nobody wants to get involved. So what we have today is we have a couple of clips that I'd like to show. Clip number 1, and that's really a result of who's out there holding their signs.
They're getting involved.
They are getting involved, and these are some town meeting member voters. Well, it's good to see somebody out here
Yeah,
because it's very quiet.
We're out.
it is.
You're out.
We
Duking it out
understand
for
that
library
maybe
trustees.
this is the only race, the library trustees, really.
I know.
So
And the
we
town
get
meeting
yeah, but that's check the box. 2,000 people come out.
If that many.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Julie Kurtz.
Well, that's what
I'm
I've been
up for
saying on the
re-election
show,
for library
that this is not an election.
State election, we get 10. Maybe national, we get 15 in town,
Yeah.
something like that.
That's a real shortcoming, I think.
Well, it's great to see somebody out here. I
Oh!
appreciate it.
Look who's here.
Here is Joe Collins, our clerk, and he's going to explain to me the handicapped access voting ballot and booth. This is handled by the clerk's office. I can't even see it.
It's a voting ballot. It's an automac voting machine that assists people with handicap or disabilities. And what it does, I've fed in this case, a precinct 8 ballot into the machine, and what it does, it makes it more visible for the people to vote, and
They can mark it.
they
right
can
there?
mark it by hitting that oval would fill in. Then, okay, under vote, it tells me I didn't vote for anything. Do you want her to return the contest or continue? In this case, I'll continue. There's the selectman's race. It's going to tell me again that I didn't vote, gives me a chance to go back and vote if I needed to. There's the school committee. There's library trustees.
And the help is basically increasing the size of the ballot.
That is correct.
And the questions on
People that have difficulty grasping a marking instrument, all they have to do is hit it with the thumb and it would fill in. There's your housing authority.
So this is your touchscreen computer.
Touch screen, yep.
Great.
You continue on, and there's your town meeting members. Let's tell him there's more on the next page. What it means is it's the candidates. There were extra spots to write if you wanted to write in. But next contest, there's your 2-year term for the town meeting member in precinct 8. All right, there's your summary. And it's asking me if I want to mark the ballot. And you'd go like that.
And that prints out a
This,
ballot.
what this would do is have the ovals filled in if I had actually voted for someone on the ballot.
Right.
And in this case, I didn't vote. I passed through all the but as you can see, it's basically this ballot you saw on the screen. It made it easier for the people to that have difficulties holding an instrument or need to sit down and need something more visual.
Assistance.
Yeah, some assistance, right?
Thank you very
Other than the
much, Joe.
assistance that we can provide at the polling location, at the individual polling
Great,
spot.
thank you very much. This is a good, is this new or is this something that's been available?
No, this is a machine that's provided and maintained by the town, but it's provided originally by the Secretary of State's office, and we maintain them and have them available for any voter that might need it on any election.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Here we have Betty Spencer, Assistant Warden for Precinct 7, and she'll give us a little rundown on the new machines that have been purchased this past year. Betty, what do we do different this time?
Everything runs smoother.
Smoother?
Yeah.
So it's the counting that's important later on.
Right.
And the ballots are all residing inside the machine
In their correct spots.
in their correct spots, whether they voted or not voted. Okay.
Right. Whether there's write-ins or...
How do you like the new machines? This is the first year.
This is the first time we've used them, and it's been a very slow day, so...
Well, thank you very much for explaining that, and now we'll go to Joe Collins to tell us what the expectations are for this election.
I'm Mark, and from Danvers Town Hall, and just making sure that the residents are aware that as of June 1st, there will be a prohibition on plastic checkout bags. So we're just here answering questions, clarifying what the actual bylaw states, and helping everybody get their collection started, thanks to East Boston Savings Bank and their donation of bags.
Thank you.
I'm Sam. I'm actually an intern here, but
Now, you're intern from where?
I'm actually doing an internship at the Danvers Police Department, and as a part of one of my duties, I'm here to hand out bags to the public. So I'm happy to be here. I think it's a good idea to get rid of plastic bags.
What high school do you go to?
Danvers High.
How empty this space is.
This is a reflection of what the attendance was. And as we reported earlier, 900 voters came out to vote.
What's
out
the
of
total number?
21,000 voters.
21,000 voters. You say 4.5%, was it?
4.3%.
4.3.
One of the lowest in history.
Empty, empty, empty.
One of the reasons for the low turnout is that people don't believe that there is anything being contested or any issues that are available for them to look at. But and I will admit that it was a good location to have all of the 8 precincts, because during that low of a turnout, it made sense. However, we did have, I believe, 4 or 5 policemen assigned to the parking lot. The school was in session, where I thought that we had made arrangements to have the election or have the school be on a training session for the teachers, but no, the students were in there. And we did have a very good turnout from the students helping out with the East Boston Bank bags that we have
But there's no
presented to you.
competition. There's no reason for people to get out and vote.
There is no competition. I don't know, maybe everybody is happy as a clam.
Well, that's the impression I'm getting, is everybody's doing so well they don't care. But that doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay, so this is...
Matt?
Matt, what about
I think
your
people should-
results?
I think people should just, it's their duty to vote, whether or not there's any contentious issues or if there's
Yes.
any competition, just for the sake of democracies to go and vote. I've always done that since I was 18, vote every chance I have. And so, but
Yeah,
I
I agree
realize
with
it's not a commonly shared
It's a
perspective.
good word you use, duty.
It is.
Just to show a brief example, I'll take Patricia Fraser as the town moderator. There were 900 votes cast, or voters showed up at the ballot box. 754 out of that 900 voted for Pat. 8 were write-ins for others, and 138 blanks. So it tells you that there's blatant apathy around our elected officials. And like we spoke at our 2 previous shows, the selectmen didn't even want to come on for any presentation of their positions because they had no opposition, so they didn't want to, get tripped.
Well, the
on any
story,
questions.
Playing it safe.
the story I tell is very simple. When I talk to people and when they talk to me, invariably they complain. The tax rates are too high. The town's spending too much money. 90% of the people I talk to give me that story. But they don't do anything. Half of them don't vote. They haven't voted in years. And you can't get anything done, you can't get anything changed unless you go out and do something. You have to get involved, run for town meeting, get out
Well,
and vote.
There's a very strange, well, it's not strange, but it's a unique thing that happened in my precinct. There were only 5 running for 6 positions. However, our friend Dan Mackey had 14 people write in his name and he's elected.
Good for him.
So there's an example of how proactive you can be with 14 votes.
Yes.
That's all it takes. The problem is now what he has to do is get introduced to the 145 different people. And like I've been saying is, I don't know, every year I try to speak at the town meeting because being a town meeting member, you express the views of the people that you're dealing with. And it's almost standing up in front of town meeting, and I don't know how you feel about it, Matt, but it's like deer with the headlights on. Nobody knows why they're there. They're staring at you. I don't know whether they're listening or not. So we have to sort of energize the town meeting. So because that's the most important body in town. That's the legislative body.
Well, we're a monarchy. We're being run by a small group of people.
Well, we have to be careful of how we let this thing get out of hand. So, East Boston Savings Bank provided, I believe, 2,000 bags, and we have put them in front of our table here because that was a very nice thing that the Danvers Savings is doing, because our plastic bags are going to be banned as of June 1. Now, there was a lot of discussion about this, and you saw that on the clip. But I think they did an excellent job, and we want to thank them very much for doing that. In light of the plastic bags being implemented on June 1, I believe Tewksbury took action at their town meeting to reverse that decision. So we'll have to find out what the
What's
results
going on
were.
there.
But this is something that's coming. Town meeting is going to be on May 20th at 7:30 p.m. at the high school. So everybody can go if they want
Oh, yeah.
to. You can sit in the
Enjoy the show.
It's quite a show. All right. So that's the story about the elections of non-elections. But what I like to introduce is we have the selectmen's meeting review at this time usually, but the meeting is being held, the organizational meeting is being held at the same time that we're conducting this program. So we don't know the results, but we'll report on it next on I think May 23rd. Education. That's become a semi-interesting discussion that's been happening. I attended the warrant article hearings and the budget hearings on education, and there was a lot of discussion in regards to the performance of our schools. Every year, the budget goes up 3, 4, 5%. But that's only one piece of the budget. See, the whole education budget consists of 3 pieces. It consists of the piece that the school committee can administer or does administer, which is in this year's budget $43 million. There's also the piece that the town administers, which is the facilities maintenance, the operations of the schools, and the utilities and all that, which in last year's budget or last year's results was almost $17 million. So we're up to $60 million already. The third piece that everybody ignores because it's on the town is another $5 to $7 million a year that we pay as debt service for building the high school, rebuilding the high school, rebuilding the grammar schools in the past. And in the future, we'll have Smith School in there as well, so that number is going to go up. We're talking $70 to $72 million a year right now that we're paying for education. And one of the contested issues on the warrant articles when I was listening to that is performance. Are we getting our money's worth? So there was a lot of discussion in regard to MCAS scores, the touchy-feely operations that we have in our schools, because a lot of people felt at that time that it's a babysitting organization. And I know I'm going to get phone calls about that, but that's how people feel. So what we wanted to do is just get an opinion from, how about you, John? What do you think about education in this town?
Well, personally, from what I have seen and from what I have read, Danvers School, the education that they provide is about middle of the road.
Right.
It's not below the average, but it's not above and into the higher rating communities. But we're spending substantial amount of money. And to me, this is something that the selectmen and the school committee members should be working harder on and getting some idea of where they are, and how to improve. It's great to be in the middle, but at the same time, you want to give your kids better. You want to make them eligible for good schools. In today's community, when I was growing up and when my kids were growing up, we went from very seldom the average person went to college in my days. When my kids were growing up, basically most of the people were going to college. Nowadays, everybody goes to college.
Well,
And
that's the path that has been chosen for them, because Danvers High School, the path is through college. When I was listening to the Essex Tech presentation of their programs, they're more geared to day-to-day life that these kids will experience, not necessarily going to college, but going to a technical job.
well, they're getting job experience,
Yeah,
more or less.
absolutely.
They're learning what is necessary to work as a job, plumbers, electricians, and this type of thing. And to me, this is fantastic. That's a great way to go. You have a certain segment of your population that is best for them. But you have a certain segment of the population where today, especially, college education is necessity because of many of the jobs, majority of the jobs out there really are such that they're in business. It's
Right.
not a plumber or an electrician. It's a computer function type of situation.
But our population, maybe you want to add something, Matt, but our population is lacking a lot of these plumbers, electricians, carpenters. You can't get anybody to do any work for you because there is nobody coming up the ladder in the trades.
Well, that's why the trade schools
Essex Tech, yeah.
is such a great, and that's basically this has changed in the past few years, and that's great. Maybe we need a whole new change in the system that provides more opportunities for this group.
We need. I'll let you talk.
Yeah, I'll chime in.
because
So-
I will.
Just to comment briefly on the technical aspect of Essex Tech, there's a considerable wait list there. The school is already maxed out in terms of the number of students that they can accept. But back to the budget itself for the schools, I attended a finance committee budget review for the schools, and fellow town meeting member Andrea Daly, who taught in the Danvers school system for I think more than 30 years. She gave a presentation. She had done considerable research on how test scores have kind of flatlined and actually have been regressing over the past few years as we continue to spend more and more money. I think not every student should be shepherded towards college. It's not for everybody. There's ways to provide an excellent education for people that may want to take a different path rather than going to college, especially these days with such a significant debt load that college kids, college students graduate. They owe tens of thousands of dollars in school loans, and it really cripples them in terms of being able to start a family, purchase a house. But just back to what Andrea Daly had discussed, there seems to be a focus on MCAS and the standardized tests to focus the education on driving up the scores. That's not really a good, well-rounded education. It's just not everyone can perform well on tests. I think that's a known fact that students handle testing in various ways. But I do think that technology should be introduced throughout the curriculum, whether it be the arts or in the sciences, a STEM curriculum. But also the sort of a constitutional foundation as well. It seems today we've lost track of how this country was founded. So I think technology and a kind of a constitutional understanding of how our democracy works would be beneficial for all of us.
See, Matt, the one thing that I got from this discussion at the Finance Committee meeting is the school committee, in their wisdom, has basically lowered the criteria for MCAS scores, which in their own way are a false indicator sometimes, but that's what all of the communities in the state of Massachusetts use as a yardstick of how well those students are performing in their schools. And we have lowered the yardstick of, or we have not challenged our students to strive for a higher score, because what the school committee and the superintendent was trying to get across is that they're reaching out for the emotional and the environmental relationship between the students and the community. You know, you can stress scores all over the screen, but the problem is that high school is supposed to provide the basics that you take with you to college. Experiences have been told to me, and I've had my own personal experiences. The first year, you get accepted to college. First year is spent repeating everything that you have not learned in high school.
It's remedial. So freshman in college is learning the basics you should have already known before you graduated.
Absolutely. And this is where the challenge has to be imposed by the school committee to get those grades and that knowledge up to a level where people that send their kids to college, let's say it's a 4-year college, $50,000 to $70,000 a year. We're spending $16,000 a year for a high school education. Why can't we challenge those kids to reach the level where they start learning in the first year instead of the second year?
Well, this is what we've been talking about for years now, and the schools, let's say they're good to a certain extent, but they don't reach the point where they're great for the kids. And this is something that has to change, but it won't change until you get involved. Parents should be out there lackadoozing with the selectmen and with the school committee to get things changed and to make things better for their kids.
Yeah, I agree. So it's a two-way street, right? So you can't have the teachers doing 100% of the education. The parents and the community as a whole need to be engaged. So it's you know the saying, it takes a village. Well, that's definitely the case here.
Oh, you sound like Hillary.
That's right.
I had to get that.
All right.
Well, I think that's an issue. Jack Billings was another one that presented a comparison of scores surrounding communities. We are at the bottom or at the lower end of the comparisons of Hamilton, Wenham, even Beverly.
Well, it's definitely a societal challenge, right? So you have these more affluent communities doing much better, but I think there's something more going on there. Maybe the role models in those communities are maybe both parents have college educated, so there's other dynamics that are taking place as well.
That's a responsibility of parenting, and school education is the primary one. I mean, you can potty train them, but you can't take them to school and sit with them. They need to learn from what's being presented.
Yeah, that's my just one final comment. When I was in in middle school and high school, I know that my fellow students that where their parents were actively engaged in the homework process or motivating the students to learn more, those students were the ones that strived. Parents that were more disengaged, those students are the ones that sort of fell through the cracks.
That's right. So hopefully we can at least advance the conversation.
Rising tide raises all.
Right. I'm not going to cover the electric company because that's an issue that's been going on for a long time. What I'd like to do is go to story number 3, other news updates, and just to report for information is the DPW garage, which, as we all know, had the contaminated soil stored on it, so therefore they couldn't build the office building, but they have included a warrant article for $475,000 as being repaid by the ratepayers because of that building being delayed 1 year as a result of locating that contaminated soil. I understand and I know the numbers, but there's no bid comparison. There was a bid opening today, and the numbers probably not as high as they expected, so we probably look forward to a revision on that warrant article. But all that adds up is to the water rate increase. They're talking 10%. 10% increase on water. So another one is John and I, and you were not available, we went to the water reservoir and the water treatment plant. We have edited the report and is being presented on a regular schedule for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I believe. But it's a water treatment walk around that gives you a visual of what actually happens. Where does the water come from? How is it being treated? The flow in and out, and the water is improving. They are putting in a chlorine injection plant down by Folly Hill Tank.
It's a very interesting situation and building.
So we have clip number 3, if we can take a look at that. There is the water treatment plant, and you'll get a very good presentation that Mr. McCarthy and his individual representatives that are in the plant, operators. And there's another thing is that we have identified another student from Essex Tech that is interning for 6 months at the facility. So Jason McCarthy gave us a very, very interesting tour, and I hope it helps everybody understand what we're up to at the water treatment plant.
Well, I think one thing that should be mentioned is that the water plant in general, the costs have either leveled out or gone down. And yet your rates are going up.
Cost of the water treatment plant
Yes.
was built out $20 million back in 2013 or 14. That was the filtration plant that was added, and we discussed that on that presentation. However, the operating costs have not gone down because there's a component of operating that is steady and it's always going to be there. But now that we're processing less water, maybe we can alleviate these water bans that we already have level 2. Level 2, which means you cannot sprinkle your lawn or garden between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So what they're doing is you can do it at night.
And you can use a hose. I think it's automatic sprinklers aren't allowed, right?
I believe so,
Yeah.
right.
We'll have to, maybe we can talk about that next time.
Yes, I think we need to have people take a look at the walk around through the water treatment
Yeah.
plant.
Yeah, I've been there.
And there's a limited capacity in that reservoir, and that reservoir is beautiful. It's good for, viewing it, especially early in the morning when the mist comes up.
And when it's full.
And it's full right now.
Yeah, that reservoir has a lot of organic material in
Right.
there. That's that keeps the water treatment plant working very hard to keep the.
There's a big chemistry lab and a big chemistry set.
Yeah.
That plant is a chemistry set, basically. To sediment, it has to be removed and all that.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention just quickly on the chlorine injection
Yes.
system that's going to be added to Folly Hill Reservoir, because today people complain that, especially people that live to the west of Route 95, closer to the Middleton line, they complain about high levels of chlorine, and that is because when the water leaves the treatment plant, it's heavily chlorinated in order to be by the time it makes it all the way to the Beverly line, it's at acceptable legal minimal limits. So with being able to reduce the amount that's injected initially at the water treatment plant and then make up the difference later on in the system will kind of level it out for everyone.
This has been identified probably 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was the biggest complainer at the time. The thing is, the residual at Folly Hill, when it gets up there, is less than what's acceptable. So they will, because now they'll inject less in Middleton,
Right.
but they will inject some more at Folly Hill.
Yeah, so-
And that's going to, probably, the water will probably taste a lot better.
Yeah, it'll level it out for
It will
everyone.
taste a lot better.
Yeah, I
Well,
know.
It'll still be safe for everyone.
Okay, we also have an item on here about the Ipswich River Watershed Association, and I attended the Water and Sewer Commissioners meeting, and I raised that issue that the Ipswich River Watershed Association is a private, non-profit organization that's dictating to the surrounding communities of how much they can withdraw from the groundwater or from the river. It's been established as a whipping stick for all of the communities. The first reaction that I got from the Water and Sewer Board is, we sue them every year. So the thing is that the tail is wagging the dog here. We are criticized for using too much water. We're not withdrawing any more than is necessary from the Ipswich River watershed, but we have our own reservoir as well. So there's a limited amount of water that's available. However, there are cities and towns like Peabody, Salem, Beverly. They don't even withdraw from the Watershed Association's territory. They get their water from MWRA. And one of the things that I've brought up to the Water and Sewer Commissioners is water from MWRA is extremely expensive. And there's been some discussion between the selectmen and the finance committee that maybe we should be buying water from MWRA. I say no, because we have our own source and we should keep that source, but replenish it with the groundwater from the Ipswich River watershed area. Because
Well,
we own it.
That's what we're doing. We're looking at wells.
That's right. But that's not the well that we're looking at the alarm list facility.
Rebecca Nurse. Yep.
Rebecca Nurse
Different
property.
watershed.
That's a different water source underground. It's a different water.
But it's a source.
That's source.
That's
yeah.
what we need.
So I just have a quick comment on this.
Go for it.
So this Ipswich River Watershed Association, they're a conservation group that went to court to protect the Ipswich River, because the water that was drawn out of there in the middle of the summer was enough to extremely stress out the river. So the courts have agreed with this association, and that's why we have these water restrictions, because people want to have their lawns green all summer long, and you know, it's you know, over this past month where it rains every other day, it seems like you know,
Right.
we have plenty of water. But the fact of the matter is, there are times of the year where that's obviously not the case. So we don't need to be watering our lawns every day in the summertime. I think there's just an excessive use. So I think it's good to kind of taper back on how people use water. We use too much water as it is, if you look at the daily use.
Go ahead, John.
Are we going to talk about the rail trail?
Well, let's just finish this watershed. The issues at the Water and Sewer Commission's meeting is that we're not selling enough water. So our finances are going down, down, down. Well, we have to implement some efficiencies in producing the water and refining the water when it goes out into the system, because we're not selling enough. The consumption is reduced, but the consumption, like you said, may be used for other than human consumption purposes, watering our lawns. So let's leave that one alone. John, you want to talk about?
I just want to do a quickie on the rail trail. Let me start with what this is all about. This was Article 18 at the town meeting, rail trail expansion planning. Basically, at the May 2018 annual town meeting, a year ago, they appropriated $150,000 to begin the design of the westward expansion of the rail trail from Hobart Street to the Middleton line. This is being called the Middleton Rail Trail. This spring, the Planning and Economic Development Office applied for a grant from the state to support this project that requires a local match of 20%. To request the maximum amount for the program, which is $300,000. An additional $10,000 is required for a potential match to be added to the $50,000 left from last year's appropriation. To be quite blunt, what I'm talking about is very simple. When all this started a few years back, we were told it's not going to cost us anything. Donations, appropriations from other things and so forth. And now we're talking about $300,000, $10,000, $150,000. It's going to cost us a heck of a lot of money.
Why don't we show clip 4? This is part of the rail trail. I don't know what the location is.
This is between Oak Street and Maple Street by the bike shop.
Okay. That's what the rail trail originally was intended to be. It was handled by volunteers and donations to make it worthwhile for people to use it.
And notice the width and what is covering it.
Well, the covering
Stone
is
dust.
stone dust.
Stone dust,
Yeah.
yes. And it's only about roughly 8 to 10 feet wide.
It's probably not even that, maybe 6 feet, yeah.
That's because there's encroachment there on both sides. But, yeah. So you're talking about the westward. This is the north-south segment that was
Go to clip 5.
went live on 2012. Very little cost to the
there's
town.
nothing there on the westward yet.
No, that's what this warrant article is about. The westward
Yes,
from.
well, all I'm talking about, do we have that other clip?
Could you show clip 5, please, David?
What I'm talking about is this is costing us substantial amount of money. And you're talking, what, 300,000 for the,
This is looking south from
That's by the
Maple,
gas
next to the
station,
Maple
yeah.
Street Church.
yeah.
Yes.
And this is just the new appropriations, and what we're figuring out about $300,000 is talking about just a new extension of the trail up towards Middleton. And basically, it's going to be interesting to see how they can figure out how to cross, what is it, 95?
95 and Route 1.
Right.
Yeah. But the other thing, too, is that the overall plan that's coming down and has been in the works, not the works, but it's been talked about, and this is where they're going, is that eventually we're going to be covered so that we can go from New Hampshire all the way to Boston
To the Cape.
and to the Cape
Yeah, they're
eventually.
talking the Cape.
But if you can imagine what this is going to cost us all over, eventually it's going to be this rock stone or whatever it's covered with it now, but it'll be hard turf covered or asphalt or something. But one of the things that I ran across when I was looking at this originally, the bike path, right now, I've used it. It's good. It's a nice walking path. It's a nice bike path. You can go out and walk your dog out there. It's beautiful. But in a few years from now, it's going to be actually a railroad connection, if you want, between Boston and New Hampshire and the Cape and Middleton and all over. And you'll get large numbers of people. You'll get bike clubs. And my own experience, having seen some of this going on, like these bike clubs, they really they're speedy, they're large groups, and it's not what we have today, a comfortable walking, biking path. I think you should get involved and find out what's going on. Matt, you want to discuss it?
So I've been involved with the rail trail since 2002, and John and myself have been combative about this topic for many years. I'm currently a member of the Rail Trail Committee and have been for 10 years. This westward expansion that we're talking about, it goes from the Townsend Oil or behind the fish market, goes west, crosses 62 at Vineyard Street out to Nickel Street, and then out along Route 62 to the post office out at Hawthorne. The money that was expended last year in the warrant article was to do a design. The town hired a consultant to do an initial design out to Nickel Street. There's a couple of challenges. One is crossing Beaver Brook and also crossing Maple Street.
Yeah, they're going to have to build a bridge, aren't they, over Beaver
Oh,
Brook?
no, we just need to signalize like we've done at other locations where we have the flashing yellow lights that seem to be quite effective once people realize that there's people crossing the street there. But this money that we're expending, we're required to show sort of a good faith where we put in at least some of the money for the 20% design, and then we have buy-in from Representative Spiliotis and Senator Lovely. We've had them out there to do site visits.
So what are you talking about, state funds?
Yeah, there'll be state funds and then also federal money that's...
Gee, when I went to school, they told me the state funds taxes were supplied by the individual, like, such as myself. So I'm paying for it no matter whether it's
well,
Danvers
yeah, this
funds
comes,
or state funds.
a lot of the transportation money comes from the federal gas tax and is dispersed by Mass DOT.
Oh, God, I pay those taxes too.
But, yeah, well, you know, you talk about the segment that goes from Nickel Street out through the Route 195 corridor. That's going to be TIP money, which is a transportation improvement program, that money that's used for roadways and such. But, you know, you talk about large volumes of bicycles coming through town. Every day we have tens of thousands of motor vehicles coming through Danvers on Route 95, 114, 128, 62. You know, we don't talk about that, the environmental impact that all that traffic has on the residents of Danvers. Danvers is just a point between, you know, point A and point B. So the rail trail, it's a benefit for the residents and visitors. It channels people into the downtown business area, and it creates a healthy way for people to travel around town.
Well, Matt, I will agree with you. At the present time, I think the rail trail is very good. My problem is it will expand.
Yep.
And that's going to be expensive, and use will increase substantially.
Sure. Unfortunately, we're not going to be here when that happens, John.
Well, that's,
Well,
I'm thankful for that sort of thing.
See, my issues with the rail trail, and you know I've been an opponent from 1995. However, when the promises were made by the Rail Trail Committee and the assurances that it's not going to cost the town anything because they will take care of all of the maintenance and operations of the rail trail, the signals on 62, the signals along other streets, those are all paid for by the electric customers. I mean, the costs of maintaining and now future development of this rail trail are being paid for by taxpayers, ratepayers, and individual donations. It's a combination, which is fine. But the problem is that's not being transparent. The promises were made in 2003 or whenever it opened. I think it was 2003.
Well, in 7 or 8 when we signed the lease with
Right.
MBTA.
So it's about 10 years ago. And at that time, I know that I've heard from all of the selectmen that were there, we're sure that it's going to be funded by the committee for the rail trail, that's good news. But the thing now, it has transformed into an obligation to the taxpayers and the ratepayers of our community. So let's just go back to the private organization that was handling this and not just dump it. Everything that gets initiated in this town, organizations or programs, ultimately end up being on the taxpayer.
Well, I would disagree, because on the north-south segment, that was constructed pretty much by volunteers. Iron Horse Preservation came in and took the rails and ties away at no cost. We received a grant from state DCR to put down the stone dust. It's maintained by volunteers on a regular basis. If you go out to the rail trail website, you'll see a lot of local businesses donate their times. We don't, those flashing lights, those were purchased either through a warrant article or they were purchased through donations.
Doesn't matter, it's taxpayer money.
It's taxpayer money.
Yeah, but it's warrant articles that were approved by the taxpayers of Danvers.
Well, taxpayers
No, it was
sometimes
approved
spend
by
too
town
much money.
meeting members.
Town meeting members of the duly elected representatives.
And you
of the-
talk about the state representative and state senator, all they ever do is spend more of our money because there are unfunded liabilities that we incur for every program that's being initiated.
Yeah, as long as the money is being spent responsibly, that's the key, right?
Well, the responsibility falls on all of us.
That's right.
Okay,
Let me just throw one.
you want to?
Final word.
No,
Well-
there's more.
I just think that I keep telling people, read the paper. There are things in there that you should know about, but you don't know unless you read the paper, most of us. The Historical Society has a beach party, Saturday, May 11th, from 10 a.m. to noontime at the Glen Magna Farms. Do you know there's a 130-year-old beech tree?
Yes.
Man,
Yes.
I never heard
It's
of that
gorgeous.
one before. The picture was in the paper was gorgeous, but it's just amazing to me. Here they're having, in effect, a party, a birthday party for the 130-year-old beech tree. They're going to have live music and a birthday cake, and that's on Saturday, May 11th, from
That's
10
Mother's
a.m.
Day.
to noon.
That's Mother's Day.
Beautiful.
This Sunday?
Yeah,
No, it's Saturday the 11th.
Saturday.
Saturday, okay,
Yeah.
good. I may
Okay.
just go. All right. Thank you, John. That was a good community relations episode. Matt, you wanted to talk about the planning department and clip number 6.
Sure, I think this is the School Street
This
building.
is School Street, right?
Yeah, so last time we talked about the planning,
There we go.
planning department is working on an overlay district in the downtown Maple Street corridor. This is 21 School Street, this building here that we're looking at. It was an empty lot for many, many years. It's on the corner of School and Franklin. And this building is permitted as a 2-family on a lot that's less than 7,000 square feet. So it's basically all building, and the only land is what the required setback, maybe 8 feet all the way around. So like I say, 2-family now, and last Monday they went to the ZBA to make it a 3-family with insufficient parking, and it was ZBA declined to rule on this with a special permit, so it's going to go to the planning department.
What does that mean?
The planning department, I think, has a leeway in terms of what the zoning permits. This is an R1.
So there's no approval coming through.
Well, planning department has to rule on whether or not they can increase it to 3-family. But you know, the parking in this area, School Street and Franklin Street, that intersection by Danvers Auto Body, very busy throughout the day, and parking in that whole area, as we know, is limited to just one side of the street, and most.
It's just up from the church, so there's a lot of use of these
Activity.
streets.
Well, it's just I use this as an example because if you look at Cherry Street, we saw the same type of development. You know, the developers buy these parcels and they just maximize them for the greatest financial return possible. And it's a detriment to the neighborhood. It's just increases the density to the point where there's very little open space and not enough parking on
Well,
site.
there's no parking on this particular lot, I believe.
I think there's a 2-car garage and a little bit and a small
there isn't.
driveway.
Well, this is where the watchdog of the planning department or the planning board or the zoning board would be able to answer a lot of these questions, and hopefully you can take part in that. Gentlemen, ladies, we have a end of the show. Our next show will be May 23rd, and look out for a discussion on the DCAT board proposals that we've made and the results of that letter. So we'll discuss that at that time. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Matt, and
All
thank
right.
you, John.
Good night, people.
Good night, Danvers.
Good night.